Welcome to Know It, Live It. Well, I have insightful conversations with fascinating people who share their life's missions, determinations, passions, principles, and spiritual journeys. Today, I have Guy Stoker with me. He specializes in epilepsy compositions. Guy is well-traveled, both physically and musically. He began life in Northumberland, UK, and he now lives in Paris, France. He is focusing his talents and exploring epilepsy from different perspectives through music. Guy, welcome to Know It, Live It.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here, and it's nice to eventually meet you because we've communicated quite a bit, but this is the first time we've ever had a face-to-face conversation.
It is very nice to meet you. I want you to tell me about your journey with music and epilepsy and how sound interacts with those two things.
Yeah, well, my journey with music and epilepsy kind of went in tandem from a very, very early age. So I was having seizures almost from birth, really, as a baby, as a toddler. But from a very young age, it was also very noticeable that I had a gift for music as well. Throughout life, my epilepsy kind of came and went. I would have periods where I would have lots of seizures, and then I would have spells where I was okay. And one of the real issues for the doctors was that my epilepsy wasn't pinned down to one kind of seizure. I had in total over the years 8 different types of seizure, ranging from blank staring to full-blown what's now called tonic-clonic seizures, and also what's called gelastic seizures, which is where you lose emotional control and your emotional ability is like a rubber band, basically. So you can go from laughing intensely at nothing at all to crying your eyes out at nothing at all and back again within a few seconds. And another interesting kind of seizure is what's known as T, as in the drink, which stands for transient epileptic amnesia. Now, that is a non-convulsive seizure whereby the patient is actually fully aware that they've completely lost their memory altogether. And that happened to me when I was at college studying music. I'd gone to the city library to do some extra study and was waiting for my dad to come and pick me up. And I became aware as I was sitting there reading that actually I hadn't the first clue what was outside the window or where was outside the window, where this building was that I was in, how long I'd been there, how I got there. And I went to the desk and I told the girl, I said, "You're going to think this sounds strange." I said, "But I've lost my memory." And there was a little bit of recall, if you like, within me that knew that if I gave her my wallet, most likely there would be something in there by which she could trace my emergency contact, which was my dad. And the next thing I knew, my dad was standing there, and I said, "How did you get here? How did you know I was here?" And he said, "Well, the library rang me." And I said, "When?" And so he took me home, and again, he might as well have been driving me through Alaska, which is a place I've never been to, because I didn't recognize anything at all. And he'd already phoned my mom, who'd phoned the doctor, who'd already arrived. And the doctor was asking me a series of questions, and the answer to each one was, "I don't know." I said to my mum, I said, "I need to go to the bathroom." And she said, "Okay." And I said, "Where is it?" And this was in my own home. And the doctor said, "Do you know anything at all?" And I said, "The only thing I know is that the person sitting next to me is my mum." I said, "Other than that, no." So I was admitted to hospital, and the next morning I fully remembered that whole episode. So that made it really interesting. But where the two came together, music and epilepsy, was actually many, many years later. I'd already gone through college, I'd already gone through university, I'd already started a job. I was a teacher for 7 years. And then I decided that teaching wasn't my calling. And so I wanted to do a master's in composition because my musical lineage, my great-grandfather on my mom's side was actually a very successful and well-known composer and conductor and adjudicator in the brass band world. So he was like my benchmark. I wanted to be one day as good as him. And but that was always my drive when I was studying composition. Is my work as good as his? You know, if he was listening to my work, what would he say about it? So when I did my master's in contemporary composition, I actually got the opportunity, the unique opportunity, to bring music and epilepsy together for the first time, because I was at a conference at Durham University on music and emotion. And on the third day of that conference, one of the guest speakers referred to a rare form of complex reflex epilepsy known as musicogenic seizures, which is whereby the only trigger of the seizure is the patient's emotional response to the music. And that musical trigger is entirely patient specific. It's more predominant in female patients and in Asian patients. For example, a young Japanese girl only had a seizure when she heard Happy Birthday. So hers was quite easy to pin down, really.
Yeah.
Wasn't great for her, but it was very easy to pin down. And I found an expert in that field, in that speciality, at Johns Hopkins University, a gentleman called Dr. Peter Kaplan. And me being the kind of nature that I am, I'm very much a forward person. If there's something I want to find out and I know somebody who knows, I will directly ask them. There's a saying in the northeast of England which is shy bairns get nowt, meaning if you don't ask, you won't get. And that was very much my dad's philosophy as well. And so I reached out to Dr. Kaplan and I said, is there any chance I could come over and actually meet you? And he said, yes. And the following week I was in Baltimore and I had a brilliant week with him. And he was so accommodating. And towards the end of that week, he said he was busy writing a paper on musicogenic epilepsy for a conference in Prague. And I said, oh, I wish I could get to something like that. I said, obviously, working for a master's degree, you have to be able to completely verify thoroughly everything you say. It can't just be your opinion. It has to be fact. So he turned to me and he said, okay, well, let's write the paper together then. And I was just absolutely flabbergasted. So we did. And the symposium in Prague was actually on the use of the arts, plural, as a means of non-verbal expression of experience of living with epilepsy. Because you'll understand yourself that by the very nature of epilepsy, sometimes it isn't possible to convey that experience through words.
That is true. I think sometimes when there are diseases and conditions that you don't see, it's not like you can say the color of the discharge, or there's a rash, or here we can count the polyps. You don't see and you can't describe a seizure with words. It is so difficult.
Mm-hmm.
And the doctor doesn't even need to see you.
And
I've never met my neurologist in person. She's never touched me because she doesn't need to, because it's just words. You're just describing it. And to describe a seizure with words it's incredibly difficult because there are no words. You're just trying to make it up to get as close as you can.
Yeah.
And you're not even knowing if the other person understands. But music is much more a universal language.
It is. And that is where I've thought ever since that actually music in its breadth and depth and diversity and complexity is the perfect tool to explore, express, explain, expand and educate in epilepsy, because the two things share so many commonalities. You know, the epilepsy is one singular word for such a multitude of things. Not only that, historically, it goes back tens of thousands of years and beyond. Music is a singular word for so many things that goes back tens of thousands of years and beyond. So actually, they are the perfect sibling, if you like, for one another. So that has always been my drive. And when I was at the symposium, I actually highlighted very bravely, looking back at it, to Dr. Stephen Schachter, who was director of neurology at Harvard, who was leading the symposium, that actually music was very underrepresented compared to other art forms, compared to visual epilepsy art, compared to choreography, compared to literature. There is a theory that Alice in Wonderland is actually the description of Lewis Carroll's epileptic seizures, but that's a different story again, and that would probably extend this conversation by about 20 minutes or so. But I did highlight that to Stephen Schachter, and he invited me to fill in the gaps. And I thought, well, this is the perfect opportunity to expand my composing skills and also develop further my epilepsy knowledge and actually put these two things together in so the first album which did that was 20 tracks. It was an album called Ictal Variations. And for those who don't know what the word ictal is the medical term for any epileptic event. So it was called Ictal Variations because it's based on the experience of epilepsy, but variations because, again, some people listening might not understand or be aware that there are over 40 different types of epileptic seizure. There's not just one, there's not just grand mal, or as it's now known, tonic-clonic. There's 39 others, at least. And so therefore, it was important for me to not only explore the world of seizure, but the broader world of epilepsy as well. Because when my seizures were active, my wife and my mom and my colleagues and my friends were living with epilepsy. I really always stress that it's not only the person who has the seizure who lives with epilepsy. So that album came at epilepsy from four different angles, four very specific angles, which was patient, carer, medical, and outside world. And they are four very different angles, but equally vitally important angles to explore in order to really get hold of the concept of this complex and deep and broad subject, which in certain parts of the world they don't even know what the word epilepsy is. So there's a conservative figure out there that says approximately or at least 65 million people around the world live with epilepsy. And the reason they say at least is because, as I've just mentioned, in some cultures and countries, that the word epilepsy doesn't exist. And if somebody lives on their own and they have a more minor type of seizure, they might not even be aware that they have seizures. And also, another reason is, and I've spoken on this before, is that sometimes telling the truth can be very expensive.
That's very true. If you got 65 million with epilepsy, and then, of course, their loved ones are impacted, or even
Yeah,
people that don't love that much, right? So let's say there's two of those people per one person.
yeah,
That's a lot of people.
yeah, yeah,
That's a lot of people impacted. And
yeah,
then there are the whole gamut of money that goes into it,
yeah,
the travel,
yeah.
the doctor's appointments, the medication, the
Mm-hmm,
wait times,
mm-hmm.
impacts and impactful. And then the dependency you have on the medical system, the underlying impact that there could be a seizure at any time. For a person with epilepsy, what people who don't have it may not understand is their underlying level of vulnerability, which we've talked about earlier. You're vulnerable because you're dependent. You're dependent on a medical research field. You're dependent on transportation. You're dependent on good medicine. You're dependent on insurance. You are dependent on loved ones who'll be there. If you have more intrusive seizures,
Yes.
so to have this music as a way of joining us together, as our site does, purplechorus.com, that kind of community, they're so varied, is a really neat opportunity. And
Thank you.
have something other than words is a great opportunity as well.
Yeah, definitely. And you mentioned Purple Chorus. That was a bit of a chicken and the egg concept, really, because the idea came from writing songs about epilepsy for somebody else who had previously written a musical about epilepsy, wanted to do so potentially again, but using new music and a new composer myself. And one of the things that I found very interesting about how she'd approached that previously was that in part of that original soundtrack, the epilepsy becomes first person. So it's not somebody singing about epilepsy, it's epilepsy singing. And I thought that was a really interesting concept. So two of the tracks on the album Purple Universe actually do exactly that. And
Which tracks are those?
the first track, which is I'm Epilepsy, and the penultimate track, which is very much a kind of the a very twisted track because it's not as it seems, but that's deliberate because we know ourselves that within the world of epilepsy, things aren't quite as they seem on the outside. So the penultimate track sounds like a kind of Frank Sinatra, top hat, cane, big band track, yet below that surface is actually something very sinister because when you listen to the lyrics, what it's saying is, it doesn't matter what you take, it doesn't matter what you call me, it doesn't make any odds, I'm not going away. And if you wanted to share that one with people, that would be fantastic.
I am here, I am there. You think I've gone, I'm everywhere. Your special friend, right to the end. I'm epilepsy. I'm your smile, upside down. You might say I'm your friend. I'm your scary circus clown. I'm epilepsy. Back on this, give me a spoon. Some people say that it's the moon. How many names and many faces you'll see. Though hard as they try, I'm not for saying goodbye. But for now, we'll see you later from me. All right.
On your first album, Ictal Variation, you have music that represents seizures.
I do, yes.
I have been able to listen just very little bit of that songs before I have to turn them off
Yeah,
because they are incredibly like disturbing, and I think that's
yes,
what you mean them to be.
yes, yes, absolutely.
And then you have one song on there that I don't have the title because I know you're going to tell me the title, that really represents how isolating it can be on the emotional side
Yes,
of having epilepsy, as I'm sure many people who have different health problems can feel. This just happens to be about epilepsy, that aloneness. So, some of your songs go for many different
yeah,
ailments,
they
but
do.
that loneliness one is really powerful. Tell me more about the songs you write that have to do with the emotions of having a physical ailment.
Well, the way I tend to go around it, if it's a song as opposed to an instrumental piece, because on the first album there's a combination of the two. In some cases, I thought that the music could speak better on its own rather than trying to find the equivalent words, which is why tracks such as Brainstorms sounds absolutely horrible because it's meant to. It's conveying a totally horrible experience. So you can't decorate that and put a nice pink bow around it and say, here's a tonic-clonic seizure, isn't that nice? No, it's not. So how I did that, I took 5 tracks that I'd already written previously, and I put them onto one file, and I played all 5 simultaneously backwards. And I also messed around with panning as well. So therefore the sound is coming from all kinds of directions. So it's not just a simple right and left. It's right, left, above, below, diagonally, whilst all of this unusual sound and these unusual rhythms are all happening all at once. And that essentially is a musical representation of how it can feel to have a seizure, because normality disappears. Normality isn't there in that seizure state at that given point. The track, the instrumental track, or the, I would say, artistic track on that album called Isolation, what I did was I took a recording device and I carried it in my pocket, and I didn't actually say anything at all. I just carried it around with me, walking down the high street. I had it in my pocket when I took a flight from Bristol to Newcastle, etc., and also recorded a busker playing as well, a saxophonist. And in the studio, what we did was we positioned that sound, so that sound, all of that sound seemed quite far away from the person themselves. So what that's putting forward is there's the rest of civilization, there's the rest of society, and then there's you. And it created that degree of separation. And so many people, I've heard it so many times from so many people who live with epilepsy. One of the things they say is, I feel so alone. And whilst we know they're absolutely anything but alone, that was an important ingredient in conveying the experience of epilepsy, to convey through sound. So rather than just saying, I feel alone, I thought, well, here is a musical or an artistic sound design way of expressing what it's like to be separated from everybody else. So you're there, you're on the street, you're in the aeroplane, etc., but it's them, then you. It's not us. I thought that was really very, very important. But in the album Purple Universe, I actually did that in song structure through the song Surrounded in Isolation. And that's a very kind of angry mood to that song, but at the same time it's sending out an important message. Together we stand alone. So we might feel like it's just us, but actually there's millions of us. And if we bring our forces and our knowledge and our care and our experience together, then actually we realize that no, we're not alone at all. And the whole ethos of the reason why it's called Purple Chorus and not Purple Solo and not Purple Sound is because, of course, chorus involves lots of people. And that is a really, really strong ethos in my work as an epilepsy composer.
Why purple?
Purple is because purple is actually the world recognized color associated with epilepsy awareness and epilepsy support, etc. And how that came about was through a young Canadian girl called Megan Cassidy, and she has active epilepsy, and she was watching TV with her mom, and the ads were on, and it was World this day, World that day, World the other day, etc. Ride a bike for this, run 5 kilometers for that, etc. And she said to her mom, she said, well, there isn't an epilepsy day. And our mom said, yes, you're right, there isn't. So they kind of thought ideas through, etc. What would you call it? And said, well, you have to have a colour. And many, many years ago, lavender was actually believed to be a good and helpful treatment for epilepsy because of its calming effect. And as a as an alternative to pharmaceutical medication. But they said, well, lavender's a little bit too specific as a color. So lavender is kind of a shade of purple. So they eventually came up with the idea, let's have Purple Day. And it's stuck ever since.
That's a pretty cool story. A little girl
Yeah.
making a huge
Yeah,
impact.
global impact.
Conversation with their mom, and then they got up and did something about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's
And that is so important because you can have ideas. I could sit in my living room and have ideas, but unless I actually approach somebody and tell somebody and share it with somebody and try and find ways of collaborating with somebody, that's all it is. It's an idea in my living room, and it's not going to change anybody's world at all. Which is another reason why conversations such as this and the work that people do to emphasize that actually epilepsy is very much an everyday thing. It's not this mystic lotion, potion, magic, witchcraft, a demonic possession thing from many centuries ago.
2025.
Exactly. It's now, and it was yesterday, and it'll be tomorrow as well.
We're not. That's what people used to think about epilepsy. All kinds of great. I think in some parts of the world that might still be true, but I'm not.
Yeah,
sure.
I believe so. Yeah.
Crazy. Crazy. So tell me, when you have an idea, start to finish, I'm assuming you have the end in mind before you begin. What's the start to finish to composing a piece of music?
Well, if it's a piece of music, then I tend to get one line. It might only be 3 or 4 notes. So I'll come into the studio, which is where I am now, and I will play around with those 3 or 4 notes, and then I will decide, well, okay, where does that need to go next? Do I already know what this piece of music is trying to convey? Or am I going to find that out through process of elimination? So I might try with various different instruments. I generally first start with just the sound of the piano. And then I will think, well, okay, perhaps this phrase conveying this message or this emotion would sound better with a different instrument. The beautiful thing about orchestral composition is the way I see it and the way I approach it is it's like writing a script for a group chat. And that becomes so much less daunting. So once you have the opening line of the conversation, then you have the opportunity to decide, well, who's going to speak next? What are they going to say? Are they going to say the same thing in their own voice? Are they going to say something else? Are they going to agree or disagree? Are they going to put a different point forward? And then are you going to get a group of people talking at the same time? Is it going to be multiple conversations as it is in a group chat? Quite often there's lots of different people saying lots of different things. And providing you make sure that there's no collisions, then that's perfectly all right. Or if there are musical collisions, that they're very fleeting and not terribly jarring, and that you can kind of move straight over them. So that whole process, if I'm doing something like that, tends to take me around about a day, because I will get a basic idea down and then I'll listen to it back and I'll think, well, that doesn't need to be there. Save that for later. Or that's okay, but it needs to come up, speak louder or speak softer, etc. So once I've got the initial scaffolding, then I'll go more into the analysis and the dynamics and the flow, etc. Do I want it to speed up at any point? Do I want it to slow down at some point? So all of those decisions, and it might sound daunting, but the great thing about being the composer is every single one of those decisions is yours. And so when you listen to a song or a piece of music, as I say to people, all you're listening to is a collection of individual decisions stitched together. You don't have to look at it as, right, I've got absolutely nothing here whatsoever. I need to get to 3 minutes. Oh my word, how am I going to do that? You really as a composer, just break it down into bite-sized chunks. That's the process that I go through. And if at some point I think of something else, if I get an idea and think, well, actually that's a better idea, I can find a place for that because I haven't sent the finished product to anybody yet. And it's only when I am totally satisfied, when I press play and listen from beginning to end and get to the end and think, I like that. That is the only time I will ever start actually saying to people, listen to this. So in the last album there, Purple Universe, actually came around fairly quickly. I think I wrote 10 tracks in about 5 weeks or something like that. And there was 2 tracks that didn't actually make it to the album because they were valid, but they weren't as strong as the other 10.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, I really do not want to listen to an album and think, well, most of them were good, but this one wasn't really all that great. For me, if there's a one that isn't really all that great, it's not going to happen because I don't want to put my name to something that I'm not comfortable listening to.
So when do you come up with the lyrics? How does that work?
If it's a songwriting process, then the lyrics come first.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason for that is because if I've got the lyrics, then I already have the emotion and the context, and I've got the rhythm as well.
So is the songwriting process exciting or exhausting?
It's cathartic in a lot of ways, yeah. And quite often I like to be able to use my skills as a composer, as a songwriter, to actually put those words, combine those words with a sound that matches the emotion of the words.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, if I was to just read the words, some people might connect with it, but not as much as they would if they heard the song.
Yes.
I'll give you an example, actually, if you want to. I'll go into one of my original songs.
Links to your music will be in the show notes.
That's great. So I'll take one that isn't from the Epilepsy album, but just another song that I've written. Or I'll take one from Ictal Variations. So this one is the last track on Ictal Variations, and again, like the big band one we played, it's not as it first. So it sounds as if it's kind of like a music hall parody kind of thing, but it's actually talking about a very, very serious subject in a not quite so confrontational way. So it's called Don't Judge a Book by Its Cover, and you will understand why it's called that, because so many people do hear the word epilepsy and think, oh, tonic-clonic seizures, they're going to fall, they're going to froth out the mouth, they're going to, etc.
But flail the arms around.
Yeah, exactly. We're having a conversation now, neither of us behaving in that way. So the line is, hearing the visions and seeing the sounds, finding what's lost and losing what's found. You feel me come closer as I'm walking away. We did it tomorrow, we'll come back yesterday. But don't be mistaken, it's just a disguise. The mask that I'm wearing is telling you lies. Don't judge a book by its cover. What you're looking at is not what you see. Don't fall for the cliches and stereotypes because I have epilepsy. Don't judge a book by its cover. My darling, I'm begging you, please. I thought we'd moved on from the days of possession when they called it the falling disease. So that sounds fine in itself, but not quite as strong as by hearing it in song form.
Which is?
That's on the Ictal variation.
Hearing the visions, seeing the sounds, finding what's lost and losing what's found. You feel me come closer as I'm walking away. We did it. Tomorrow we'll come back yesterday. But don't be mistaken, it's just a disguise. Mask that I'm wearing is telling you What you're looking at is not what you see. Don't fall for the cliches and stereotypes, because I have epilepsy. Don't judge a book by its cover. My darling, I'm begging you, please. I thought we'd moved on from the days of possession, when they called it falling disease. With your feet firmly placed.
That's a good.
Yeah, yeah. You can put the full song in at any.
Was the part you read, so that was pretty cool. Okay, so I wanted to go more into. You said earlier artistic sound design, and I really like that term.
Mm.
You said that earlier.
Yeah.
Just as you were discussing that. And how does artistic sound design, when you're doing that process, what do you do with the obstacles that
So,
pop up?
so the difference between, let's take that example of isolation from dictile variations. At the time of writing it, I thought I can't really get that point across as effectively if I write an orchestral piece or if I write a pop song. It needs to be rather a sound installation, if you like, rather than a song, rather than a sequence of notes one after the other, or a series of words one after the other. Because sometimes by creating a sound perspective, then that actually has more of an effect. For example, if you verbalize the words, I know I didn't say that right, but you know what I mean. If I was to verbally say, there's a room full of people, and you hear the door close, then that only leaves that to your imagination. But if I actually create the sound of a room full of people and a door closing, then that actually does the work for you. And then that actually gives your mind a clearer picture of what it is that you're experiencing, because you're not just imagining it, it's right there. But it's not a song. It's not an orchestral piece of music, because sometimes the message or the experience that you're trying to convey wouldn't match up to either of those options. And as I say, in the case of isolation, by creating that degree in the studio of separation of sound, it was very cleverly done by the producer I worked with, which was a gentleman called David Milburn. And I took the recordings from the voice recorder, and I said, I want you to put those sounds away from me. So, and he was very much a can-do producer. I would tell him my ideas, and he knew exactly how to manipulate the sound. And he just said, yeah, okay. And we just positioned. It was almost like painting a picture, really, or drawing a map. I said, I want the sound of the saxophone over there, to the far right or whatever. I want the sound of the flight attendant, not quite totally audible, but you can hear that it's another voice.
Definitely designed.
Yeah, absolutely. It was completely designed. Yeah, and it was a process of elimination. We tried different sounds in different places, and some weren't right. And eventually, after a couple of hours or so, I listened to it again, and I thought, yeah, that really does give the listener the sense that they are not part of what is going on around them. They're there, but they're not actually part of the experience. So the people walking down the street aren't interacting with them. The flight attendant isn't talking to them, he's talking to everybody. The saxophonist is playing, but not to them. So it really does emphasize that that person in that instance is isolated. That's what I was trying to convey with that, and that's the process I went to hopefully achieve that.
So when you say hopefully achieve that, I think that's interesting, because you don't know what someone else experiences. So when do you know, okay, Guy, I've been successful? Do you ever have that endpoint?
Yeah, I mean...
What is that? What does that look like to you?
After I've shared it,
You've released your baby out to the world.
Yeah. I generally don't say this is a song about or this is a piece about when I initially share it. I'll share it and I'll say, I've written this new piece or I've written this new song, but I will pitch it at people who I assume from their experience will latch on to what it's about. So I wouldn't just send it to the man across the road and say, "What do you think of this?" In a lot of cases, I'm very lucky that what comes back from those people is they'll say, "Well, this is how it made me feel. This is what it reminded me of. This is what I felt listening to that piece." And in a lot of cases, as I say, I'm very fortunate that actually what comes back to me was exactly what I intended in the first place. That was precisely what I wanted to convey.
That must be very, very satisfying.
It is extremely satisfying. And I had another example, another case of that which wasn't related to epilepsy at all. In 2003, my mom's late husband passed away in 2002 at a very young age. He was only 54.
Younger than me. That's very young.
And it was very, very difficult for me to process that. And I thought, well, I have to use my musical resources here really to convey that experience and to convey those emotions. So that was one of the rare cases where actually the music came before the words. Originally, the piece was a instrumental piece written for violin and string ensemble. A friend of mine listened to it and he said, well, if you really want to do something with that, then it should have words. And I thought, yes and no. I thought, yes, it does. It is a very lyrical melody, but at the same time, I don't want the words to get in the way of the message and emotion and feeling of the melody itself. So I thought I have to be extremely careful here. I can't just put any words down that might fit rhythmically and say, there you are.
You needed both to be authentic and real.
Yeah, yes. And I needed it to be not 99.9% right, but absolutely 100% right. And I actually asked him to write the lyrics for me because I was a little bit wary of kind of getting my own thing wrong, so to speak. And he actually did something very sneaky but very clever. He came back to me the next day with a whole series of words, none of which were absolutely anywhere remotely near what the song was meant to be about or portraying, etc. So I thought, well, okay, I'm going to have to do this myself. And so I did, and he told me later that he'd done that on purpose because he didn't want anybody other than me to write it. And I thought, that is sneaky, but
Good friend. Good friend.
yeah. And he said, well, okay, so you've got a song, beautiful melody, and he said, if you want to really do something with it, then you should get somebody famous or well known to sing it for you. And I thought, yeah. Right, like that's going to happen. I'm a school teacher in Northumberland. I'm just going to call Elton John or whoever, you know. But I had actually met a soprano singer the year before called Susanna Clark, and she was from the northeast of England, same as I was. Well, I am. And I thought if I could hand pick the voice which 100% matches that song, it will be hers. But because she toured with the Royal Scottish National Orchestra and performed all over the world and performed at Wembley Stadium and everything like that, I thought the chances of her saying, yes, I'll record your song, got to be next to nil. But I thought, as I said to you earlier, shy bands get nowt. And so I rang the orchestra that I knew she was working with. And I said, I know you can't give me her number, but if you give her mine, I would much appreciate it. And they said, yes, certainly. And I genuinely didn't expect to hear anything beyond that. And she actually phoned me the following day, much to my amazement, asked me what the song was about. And so I told her and who the song was going to be for, which was a charity called Coping with Cancer Northeast, which is still going. And she said, I will record it for you on one condition. And she said that condition is that the only financial beneficiary of the single is the charity. So I said, deal. And she came and she recorded it in a small studio in the middle of a Northumberland town where no soprano had ever been before. And we'd got all the tracks down, and then it was her turn. It was one of the most incredible moments of my musical life when the intro played and then her voice just breathed life into that song. And it was quite astonishing, really, that the very, very sound that I had between my ears when I was writing it was the identical sound that was now coming straight towards me in the recording studio. And it was just the most incredible experience. And then we shared it with many other people after that, who all said that actually that song said what they didn't know how to.
Wow.
And I just thought that is so powerful, and probably the biggest compliment anybody will ever pay me as a composer and as a songwriter. For somebody who doesn't know me to say that my work has actually verbalized for them what they didn't know how to say. I mean, that's about as powerful as it gets, really. It really is. It was just the most incredible experience. So I have been very blessed that by living with epilepsy and being a composer and having the knowledge and capabilities of actually bringing those two worlds together, I can actually create something that other people around the world who've never met me, who live with epilepsy, can listen to that and say, that's what I mean. That is such an incredibly powerful tool and gift to have. I really genuinely mean that. And that it's something I never, ever underestimate.
I'm glad you're using your gift.
Me too. Shy bairns get nowt.
Children get nothing.
Precisely. Yeah. It's a colloquial way of saying that shy people really don't get anything if they don't ask for it. And I've been very blessed that over the years I've had that bravery, if you like, or that brass neck, some people might call it, to reach out and say to people, this is what I've got. Would you like it? Can you use it? You've got something that I want. I've got something that perhaps you want as well. So therefore, it would be mutually beneficial if we actually exchange gifts, for want of a better term, really. That was definitely my dad's philosophy and his way of life, and he was brilliant at it. So he was definitely the one who I got that attitude from. So yeah, I've been surrounded by brilliant people over the years, but I've also stayed grounded. There's never a point when I'm in the studio that I think, this is the moneymaker. This is going to get me on Classic FM, Radio 1, Radio 2. This is going to get me touring the US or anything like that. I just think I know that I've got this exactly right now.
Well, thank you very much, Guy Stoker, for being with me today.
It's been a pleasure.
Even though I lived here all my life, it's like I've never seen this place. I hear that you are speaking, but I don't know what to say. And each time I have a seizure, it always goes this way. You say what doesn't kill you will surely make you strong. Each time I think it's killing me, but so far I've been wrong. Sometimes I don't know what is real and what's just in my mind. There's a lot of misunderstanding, comprehension is left behind. There's 500,000 people
Thanks for joining us on Know It, Live It. Visit knowitliveit.net for the latest scoops, recaps, and more. Remember to subscribe to this podcast so you'll never miss an episode with fascinating people who live what they know.